Hello, welcome to Bored and Confused, where I review shows based on two criteria. One, was I bored? Two, was I confused? Today's show is Seagull, true story, playing now at the Public Theater. Now, before I get into this meta-theatrical new work, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me grow this channel, and it makes me like you so much more. Okay, let's get into it. What did I know about Seagull True Story? Honestly, not much. I knew it was a story about someone who was involved in a production of Chekhov's The Seagull and did not have a good experience. That's basically it. And I knew, of course, that the public is known for experimental work, so I was expecting something truly interesting. And I am familiar with The Seagull, not deeply, but I've seen it and I've read it. So I was walking in with enough Chekhov knowledge to be dangerous. Now, here's something I didn't know until I looked this up afterwards. This show has been on a bit of a journey before landing at the public. It started at La Mama's Experimental Theater Club here in New York City, where it had a sold-out run and got some really strong buzz. Then it crossed the Atlantic and played in London's Marylebone Theatre in the fall of 2025. And now it's here at the public's LuEsther Hall, where it runs through April 26th. So this production has had time to develop and refine itself. It is not, as they say, fresh out of the oven. But I will say it still feels like it could bake a little bit more. And we'll get into that in a second. Okay, so what is this show about? Seagull, True Story, is written by Eli Rarey and created and directed by Alexander Molochnikov, a real director who actually worked at the Moscow Art Theater. And this is essentially his own story, thinly fictionalized. The main character is called Khan, which should ring a bell for anyone who's read The Seagull, because Konstantin is the young, tortured director type in the Chekhov play. Clearly, he's relating to him. So, the time is February 2022. Khan is directing a bold revisionist production of The Seagull at the Moscow Art Theater, a theater so reverential of Chekhov that the seagull is literally emblazoned on the curtain. His mother, a celebrated actress, is starring in this production. And then Russia invades Ukraine, and everything changes. The government starts putting pressure on the production, demanding changes. Khan records a video criticizing what's being done to his play and to his country, and it goes viral. The theater is now in a very difficult position, and they want Khan to publicly apologize and retract his statements before opening night. But instead, he buys a plane ticket and flees to the United States. He leaves behind his mother, his friends, and his unfinished production of The Seagull. And in New York, he discovers that making art here has its own set of impossible obstacles. Not political censorship, not yet, but commercial pressure. The big question the show is sitting with is, does true artistic freedom exist anywhere? And also, what is the artist's responsibility in regards to politics? The show also very deliberately mirrors the structure and themes of The Seagull itself, which is kind of brilliant when it works. Khan obsessing over a play he can never quite finish is its own version of Konstantin Treplev's tragic arc. So, if you know Chekhov, there's a whole extra layer of resonance here for you. All right, let's do some positives and some negatives. Let me start with what I liked, because there is a lot to like here. The theatrical inventiveness is genuinely impressive. This is a devised meta piece of theater. It has a strong directorial hand, and some of the directorial choices are really wonderful. They recreate the New York City subway with a strip of yellow tape and some movable subway columns. It's simple, it's evocative and smart. They put Khan in a rolling chair and swing him around like a centrifuge to suggest an airplane taking off as his entire world shifts. They use plastic sheeting and bags as props that morph into different things. Red is everywhere. The program, the big curtain, the MC's red velvet jacket. Red is the color of Mother Russia. And then there's Putin arriving shirtless, carried on a human horse made from 5 performers. It's absurd and theatrical and a lot of fun. The story itself is genuinely engaging and timely. Seeing how artists inside Russia were responding to the invasion, some going along with it, some quietly resisting it, some willing to risk everything, that felt urgent and necessary, and I found really interesting. And critics from the show's earlier runs really responded to that same quality. The La Mama production was praised as part documentary, part political lament, and part backstage absurdist. And That's pretty good description of what I saw as well. A lot of praise has gone to Andrei Braikovsky as the MC. He's a Russian-born actor, by the way, and he's meant to be a kind of chameleonic presence. He plays the Russian theater manager, then when Khan goes to America, he plays this American producer, and then he becomes Putin himself on that horse I told you about. He's funny and commanding, and he's our MC guiding us through this crazy play. Now, a few negatives. The show feels overly directed to me. There are so many theatrical devices being employed that they start to compete with each other rather than giving us a vocabulary that the director is using throughout. There's pin spotlights zooming in on faces. There's this big red curtain. The fourth wall is broken. There's cabaret-style MC work. There's a scene where everything is spoken in rhyming couplets. And that happens once and never again. And in the first act, there's songs that make it feel like it might be a musical, but then we don't get any more songs in the second act. So it starts to feel a little bit like a stew. And there's an awful lot of the avant-garde, and this show might actually work better as a musical, where all these devices would have a more natural home. So the tone is also all over the place, and my question was, are we doing broad over-the-top performances? Are we doing naturalistic acting? Are we doing vaudeville? Are we doing Chekhov? Are we doing it like broad comedy and drama because that's what Chekhov did? Probably yes. You can see all of these things on the stage, but I felt they weren't always in conversation with each other. And there's a lot of jokes in this show, but they didn't all land. Some of them, I think maybe the delivery could have been better, or maybe a Russian audience would respond to these better than an American one. I don't know. And then there's the second act, which is significantly longer than the first act, and that's really never ideal. And I felt a little bit of a sag about 2/3 of the way through the second act before it picked back up for a genuinely dramatic and moving finish. The shorter first act, which takes place in Russia, is the stronger half of the play. And the American second act loses some of the urgency that we got in that first act. And I think the show could benefit some rethinking for where the intermission falls and doing some trimming so the acts feel more balanced. The director, Alexander Molochnikov, introduced the piece at the top of the show, and I was struck by his quirky energy, which I wish I would have seen more of that in the portrayal of Khan, who seemed to play the role very earnestly, or was directed to play it very earnestly. So, was I bored? No, not really. The sheer volume of theatrical invention keeps things moving, and the story itself is genuinely compelling. Knowing that what you're watching is essentially a true story about a real artist who had to flee his country gives it a weight that you can feel. And it's particularly resonant right now because some of the censorship and pressure on artists that's happening in Russia, we're starting to see echoes of that here. Maybe not to the same degree, but enough that it does register. The second act did dip for me a little bit in the middle, that stretch where the momentum flagged, but it recovered and the ending landed with emotional force. So, no, not really bored. A little restless in that middle of Act 2, but not bored. Was I confused? Aha! Yes, but not by the story. The story and the themes I followed completely and found genuinely moving. But my confusion was more about specific choices being made. The biggest one is in the first act. My question was, is this director actually talented? The director in the show, Khan. The show raises the question, and I'm not sure it ever fully answers it. It implies that he got his job at the Moscow Art Theater partly because his mother is a legend there. And the actors in his rehearsals are playing things so broadly that I couldn't tell if they were meant to be bad actors or difficult actors pushing back against Khan's radical interpretation of the piece, or if the acting was intended to be truthful. There's one scene where he helps an actress channel her real grief about the war into the play, and in that moment I went, yes, I can see a great director pulling something out, something truthful out from one of his actors. And that moment really landed for me. I just wish more of the show made that case as clearly, because if I don't believe that he's a director with a vision worth fighting for, then it's hard for me to care about his journey. Of course, I'm sure it probably feels very narcissistic for a director to portray himself as being a brilliant director on stage. So I understand the desire for humility or to maybe make fun of oneself. But I think he has to present Khan as a director with a worthy vision who's being silenced by the government so that we have a reason to root for him. Okay, dead horse. And then there are all the theatrical devices. We start to play with a song in Russian that I didn't really feel was necessary. Maybe if I spoke Russian. In fact, there were a few songs in Act 1, but none in Act 2. So the rhyming couplets that appeared once and then vanished, and the different acting registers coexisting without ever fully merging into a style. I just wanted the show to pick a lane and drive in it with confidence. So to wrap it up, bored? Nope. Confused? Yes, but confused by choices, not by the story itself. The bones of the show are strong. The story is telling an important and timely story. The performances are very strong at times, and there's real emotional depth here. But I feel the show is still finding itself, and I think it has some room to grow into something really special. The good news is it's been growing with every production. La Mama, then London, and now the public. The trajectory is going up. So, who should see this show? If you love Chekhov, and especially if you know the Seagull, I think you will enjoy this, as long as you are into meta theater. And if you have any Russian ties or roots, I think you'll find this deeply personal. If you're an artist who understands the struggle of making work in a world that doesn't always want to let you, then this will definitely hit home. And if you care about what it looks like when a government tries to silence its artists and what artists can do about it, this show is speaking directly to that right in this moment. Know going in that it's still developing, embrace that, and I think you'll have a really good time at Seagull. True story. So, where did I get my tickets? I got a press ticket, thank you so much, public. And I will say that any seat in LuEsther Hall at the public works for this production. I was one in the back rows on the side all the way over, and I was totally fine. It's an intimate theater, and there really isn't a bad seat in the house. So for your cheap tickets, go to TDF. They have them for around $40. And Today Dix has a lottery for about $38. So go see it. It runs through April 26th, and circle back and tell me what you thought of Seagull. True story. All right, see you at the next one. Bye.
Don't wanna drift away, wanna stay inside the play. Keep me engaged, keep me amused with what's in front of me, 'cause I don't wanna be bored and confused.